just go over some preference things. When you, once a piece of evidence is admitted, you don't have to ask me to publish it. You can. I'm not going to get on to you for asking, but feel free to do it without asking. I'll try to announce all the times. I'll give you time signals once you go to 10 minutes, 10, 9, you understand. Then once you get to 1 minute, I'll give you 1, half minute, I'll give you the half, and then I'll stop you at 0. I'll also count you down last 10 seconds on my fingers, okay?
Awesome, thank you so much.
No problem. All right. Let me get my timer back up, and I will call the case, and then we'll do all the pretrial junk. Okay. Actually, I'll let y'all announce y'all's appearance outside of the time limit. So let me call the case real quick, and then y'all can announce your appearances, and then we'll move on to the pretrial on each side. So now calling to order the case of Jordan Street versus Reese Taylor, cause number 18 CV 00120. Counsel, if you can introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Jordan Avey, last name spelled A-V-E-Y. Here on behalf of the plaintiff in this case, Miss Jordan Street. I'm also joined by my co-counsel, Miss Rima Sahakian. And when the court is ready, we do have some pretrial matters and pretrial motions and housekeeping matters to discuss.
Defense, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll move on to the pretrial stuff. Defense, can you hear me? Oh. Defense, can you hear me? Sounds like
yes,
we're having. Yeah, if you want to introduce yourself.
Oh, Your Honor, I think we had a tech issue briefly. I'm sorry if I cut out.
Oh, it's okay.
Are we doing appearances right now, you said?
Yeah, we're doing appearances, and then we'll start the 5-minute pretrial stuff. We'll move back to plaintiff. I was just letting y'all appear for the record real quick.
Yes, Your Honor. My apologies about the technical difficulties.
Oh, it's no worries.
My name is Deeksha Kohli, appearing on behalf of the defendant, Reese Taylor. I also want to introduce you to my co-counsel and second chair, Chandler Matz. Although you won't be seeing him or hearing from him today, he'll be handling all of the technology for the defense.
Good deal. All righty, we are ready to proceed with housekeeping and pretrial. Plaintiff, you may begin. When you start talking, I'll start your timer.
Yes, Your Honor. We had a chance to meet and confer with opposing counsel before trial today, and we were able to come to some stipulations, which I'd like to now read on the record with Your Honor's permission.
Yes, ma'am.
So we agreed, both opposing counsel and I, that nobody will be introducing any evidence of Exhibit 12 or mentioning it. So at this time, we've stipulated that Exhibit 12 is excluded from evidence today.
Okay.
Additionally, we have met and conferred and decided that Exhibits 2, 3, 14, and 15 are admissible. And at this time, we would ask Your Honor to pre-admit them before trial.
Any objection? Defense?
None, Your Honor.
Okay, they are pre-admitted, and feel free to publish them at your leisure.
And then would Your Honor like me to go into the housekeeping matters as well, or would you like defense to do their pretrial motions?
No, let's go ahead and do the housekeeping. It's all one kit and caboodle.
Okay. Your Honor, because there are evaluators that need to see the exhibits in this case, and we're in a unique jurisdiction on Zoom, we will be asking after the proper foundation is laid and an exhibit has been admitted to publish that exhibit for the court in order for the evaluators to see those exhibits.
As I've said, yes, you can publish them at your leisure once they're admitted.
And then, Your Honor, due to the circumstances of this jurisdiction, we would ask that we be able to remain seated during trial today, rather than stand to respond to objections or to give statements or examinations.
Of course, and just a point of order on that. When you object, I will, of course, stop the clock. I'm not going to stop the clock for any motions that you have in the middle of the trial. So just remember, you are on the clock for that. As soon as I hear objection, as soon as I can humanly stop that clock, I will.
Yes. And Your Honor, we also invoke the rule at this time, but we would ask to keep the parties in the courtroom constructively.
Constructively invoked.
And with that, Your Honor, plaintiff is ready for trial.
Okie dokie. All right, defense, your 5 minutes, whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. I'd just like to clarify opposing counsel's previous motion that under Rule 615, we'd like to sequester all non-party witnesses, namely Aubrey Saracen, the plaintiff's witness.
Sure, right. She's constructively sequestered.
Yes, Your Honor. We also only have one other housekeeping matter, and this concerns the Zoom display.
Okay.
Because the parties will be sharing exhibits via screen sharing, we would ask both Your Honor and any scoring judges to use something called side-by-side view. This will help everyone to see the exhibits and the advocates at the same time.
I'm going to deny that request because we're live streaming this, so I've got a view that I have to keep it in order for this to be live streamed. What happens when you share something, screen share on my screen, it'll take over the whole screen. It'll blow up big and beautiful. And I believe that's how it works on most other people's screens when they're in gallery view. But, you know, I'm not going to have the scoring judges answer that. You know, they can take that under advisement.
Your Honor, we have pre-cleared. We understand that Your Honor has to keep your display in a certain view for the live streaming. However, may we display a PowerPoint presentation that we cleared with the tournament organizers to help the scoring judges if they would like to switch to this view?
Very quickly, sure.
Yes, Your Honor. We'll speed through it, I promise. Okay. So I've just shared my screen. For anyone using the default settings, you see that my image is now very small. So to fix that, we encourage everyone to use what's called side-by-side view. And if you change this setting now, you won't have to do it again because Zoom will automatically change the setting anytime the screen is shared and take it away when the screen stops being shared. It's super easy, and we'll walk you through how to do it. If you see at the top of your screen, there's an arrow next to where it says View Options. Go ahead and click that button. Next, click the last option on the drop-down menu called Side-by-Side Mode. And finally, because the image is still very big compared to the video of the advocate, you can fix that using the gray marker that separates the videos from the screen share. And if you just drag that gray marker to the center, you'll now split your screen halfway between the videos of the advocates and the screen being shared. And Your Honor, that's all we have on that presentation.
Okay. Anything further?
No further housekeeping matters or motions from the defense, Your Honor.
Okie dokie. All right, so 55 minutes for each side. Like I said, I'm going to announce your times at the end of each speech, and I'll try to announce the time when we draw objections too, just so y'all are tracking. Feel free to keep me honest, but I'm pretty good about watching the time. You know, you can tell me if you think I'm doing a bad job, and I'll try my best to correct that, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good, Your Honor.
Okay, so plaintiff, with that, you can begin with your opening statement.
Your Honor, this is a case about a high school soccer coach who cared more about punishing her students than protecting them. On September 7th, 2018, Jordan Street sent her daughter Rory to an afternoon soccer practice at Waco High, fully expecting that the defendant, her daughter's soccer coach, would make sure that her daughter was well coached, but also well protected. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have ever expected, was that this coach would become so angry with his star player that she would punish her by forcing her to perform an endless series of grueling exercises in the scorching heat. Exercises that left this young girl seizing and convulsing on that field. Exercises that caused heat stroke so severe that Jordan Street lost her only daughter and Rory Street lost her life. Your Honor, today the issue for you to decide is whether the defendant will be held responsible for those negligent actions. And we are confident that she will be, because today the evidence will show two things. First, that the defendant failed to protect Rory Street. And second, that the defendant's failures caused Rory Street's death. So let's talk about that first thing that the evidence will show, that the defendant failed to protect Rory Street. Now, to understand that, we have to go back to that day in September. Rory, she's at practice. She's a senior on the Waco High School women's soccer team, and she's good. She is really good. But even the best athletes have their limits. And on that Friday in Waco, Rory has reached hers. Because it is scorching outside. It is 105 degrees on that afternoon, and she still has hours left of practice. But Rory isn't a complainer. So she keeps working and going, even though something just doesn't feel right. The longer she goes, the paler she gets, the more she stumbles. When suddenly she hears her coach yell something out, and it's as clear as day. Street, go take your sorry butt out to Burma Road. You're useless on the field, so you might as well run until you pass out. So Rory goes to Burma Road, her coach's favorite punishment. Because you see, on Coach Taylor's team, when you're out on Burma Road, you're supposed to do 120 yards of drills, 30 yards of running, then 30 yards of dribbling. You shoot a ball into the goal, and then you bear crawl on your hands and your feet 60 yards back to the starting line. But you don't just run Burma Road once or even twice. You run Burma Road until Coach Taylor decides that you can stop. And with no breaks, no water, no shade, no matter the temperature. So even though Rory is actually in physical pain at this point, she listens and she goes out to Burma Road. But quickly, Your Honor, you'll see today that things go from bad to worse. Today, one of Rory's teammates, Aubrey Saracen, will tell you that when she takes the witness stand today. See, Aubrey will tell you that as soon as Rory joined her out on Burma Road, where Aubrey already was, she knew that something was terribly wrong. Rory was pale and clearly struggling. She was complaining of chest pain, and she was feeling funny. But Aubrey seemed to be the only one who was worried, because just a few minutes later, the team heard Coach Taylor's voice again. Damn it, Street, you don't practice worth a crap, and now you're lollygagging over there? I guess you think you're special. Well, come over here and I'll show you just how not special you are. And Your Honor, today you'll learn that that's exactly what Coach Taylor did. Because as Rory stumbled her way back to the practice field, the defendant came up with an idea. A new idea, one that she had never in 20 years of coaching put her players through before. She made Rory stand in the middle of the field, and on her side lined up were all of her teammates. When the whistle blew, Rory was supposed to start dribbling the ball and go down the line. Each one of her teammates was told to slide tackle her, told to dive towards the ball and Rory. Cleats first, knock the ball away from her and knock her to the ground. And that's exactly what happened over and over and over again. The whistle blew, Rory was knocked to the ground. The whistle blew, Rory was knocked to the ground. Until after the 15th time her teammates had been ordered by their coach to tackle her, Rory didn't get back up. She started convulsing on the ground, seizing, her whole team around her watching, praying, and hoping that she'd be okay. But Rory wasn't okay. Rory died on that practice field that day before the ambulance could even arrive. And that brings me to the second thing that the evidence will show today, that the defendant's failures caused Rory Street's death. Today, you'll have the opportunity to hear about an expert report written by a cardiologist with 20 years of medical experience treating heart patients. In it, Dr. Reagan McConaughey talks about how Rory died from a sudden cardiac death, which was brought about by heat stroke. But you'll learn that we're here today because the defendant doesn't believe that she did anything wrong in this case. Instead, she'll be forced to admit that she believes that Rory's death wasn't caused by the tackling drill that she put her through or by the Burma Road exercise, or by a combination of the two in 105-degree heat. No, instead, you'll hear today from the defense that Rory was on drugs, and that is what caused her cardiac attack. But Your Honor, what you'll also hear is that while no one disputes that Rory died with cocaine in her system, a cardiologist found that the amount in her system was only nominal and that it absolutely did not cause her death. Instead, what you'll come to learn today is that it was truly caused by a heat stroke. Heat stroke that was brought on by hard physical exercise in the 105-degree Waco heat without any water, without any breaks, and without any shade. That all of her symptoms, the paleness, the stumbling, the fatigue that her teammates witnessed, they were all consistent with heat stroke. Heat stroke that, as you'll learn, could have been easily prevented by the defendant if she'd only cared more about protecting her players than punishing them. Your Honor, Reese Taylor failed to protect Rory Street on September 7th, 2018, and her deliberate disregard for Rory's safety caused her death. That is why at the end of this trial, I will ask you to return the only verdict that is required by the law, consistent with the facts, and demanded by justice. A verdict finding Reese Taylor liable.
$45.53. Okay, whenever you're ready, defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Oops. It wasn't the coach. It was the cocaine. The plaintiff just told you the story about what happened on the soccer field. But the story they didn't tell you is what happened just before. So let's go back. Back to September 7th, 2018, in the locker room at Waco High. The players are putting on their red jerseys, they're lacing up their cleats. And 17 of them are thinking about the state title. It's months away, but they think this is our year. But one player isn't thinking about the state title, isn't thinking about soccer at all. Because today's the day she decided to try cocaine. She feels warm. She feels her heart beating a little fast. She feels something funny in her chest. But she doesn't tell her coach or her trainer or even her best friend. She decides to keep the secret to herself. She figures, all I have to do is make it through one soccer practice and I'll never do this again. But in 2 hours, just 2 hours, she'll be dead. The plaintiff tried to tell you that that day's practice was especially hard. But the evidence will show it was like every other one of Coach Taylor's practices. The 100-degree heat, the hours of running, the physical contact, even getting knocked to the ground. The evidence will show that was all normal. No, The evidence will show that September 7th was different because on that day, Rory Street used a deadly narcotic. She didn't die because of the coach. She died because of the cocaine. I want to introduce you to Reese Taylor. Her husband calls her honey. Her daughter calls her mom, but most people call her coach. For 26 years, she's devoted her career and her life to helping students. She's coached basketball, volleyball, track, softball, soccer, you name it. Some of her teams have won. Many of them haven't. But Coach Taylor has never measured a player by the scoreboard. Her biggest goal? Seeing them reach their potential. Today, there's no dispute that Rory Street's death was a tragedy. But the plaintiff has the burden of proving that Coach Taylor is responsible for her death. And there are 3 simple facts that will prevent the plaintiff from meeting that burden. Number 1, Coach Taylor's practices were perfectly safe. 2, Rory Street wasn't showing any unusual symptoms. But 3, unbeknownst to Coach Taylor, Rory Street had just taken cocaine. Let's take those one at a time. Number 1, Coach Taylor's practices were perfectly safe. You'll learn that everything the plaintiff just criticized is standard. Practicing in 100-degree weather? Evidence will show that that conditioning technique is approved by the Texas Soccer Association. The Burma road drill, where every player runs one direction and crawls the other? Evidence will show that soccer teams have been doing that drill for 30 years without injury. The slide tackling, where the players get knocked down. The evidence will show that soccer teams have been doing that since soccer was invented. But you'll learn that Coach Taylor's methods aren't just standard. They're safe. No one's going to take this stand, raise their right hand, and say Coach Taylor didn't give enough water breaks. No one will testify that her disciplinary measures are unsafe. No one, not our witnesses, not their witnesses, no one will testify that before September 7th, any of her players had ever been killed, hospitalized, or even sent home from dehydration. Which brings me to point number 2. On September 7th, 2018, Rory Street wasn't showing any symptoms that could have warned Coach Taylor of what was about to happen. You're going to hear testimony from the team's athletic trainer and Coach Taylor herself. They saw Rory Street was sweating at soccer practice. Wasn't vomiting, wasn't doubled over, wasn't clutching her side. The plaintiff told you that they're going to call an eyewitness who thinks Rory Street was showing other symptoms. But what the plaintiff didn't mention is that their eyewitness wasn't actually on the field where Rory Street collapsed. So you might be thinking, if this was a normal practice, then how did Rory Street die? Point number 3. Before she went to practice that day, Rory Street used cocaine. That's not an argument we're going to make. That's a fact that's already in evidence. The toxicology screen, the autopsy, the medical reports, they're already in evidence. And they show that when Rory Street died, her blood had cocaine. 60 nanograms per milliliter cocaine. And the plaintiff's expert is going to tell you that Rory died of a heat stroke. But what you're also going to learn is cocaine causes heat stroke. Now, I want to be clear. We're not saying that Rory Street was a bad person. We're not saying that she's the first teenager to ever try cocaine. But the evidence will show that September 7th was the first time she tried cocaine. The evidence will show on that day, Coach Taylor ran a typical practice. The heat, the running, even the discipline and the physical contact. The evidence will show that the difference was the drug. At the end of this trial, we'll ask you to find a verdict in favor of the defense. Because it wasn't the coach. It was the cocaine. Thank you.
So 45-33 remaining. Okay. And now we move on to plaintiff's case in chief. Let me get your timer set back up. 45-53. Okay. All right, plaintiff, you can begin by calling your first witness or read something in the record, however you're going to proceed. Hold on, your timer, your microphone's off. There you go.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Aubrey Saracen to the stand.
Saracen?
May I proceed?
You sure may.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the judge and tell us where you live.
My name is Aubrey Saracen, and I live in Waco, Texas.
How long have you lived here in Waco?
I've lived here my whole life, so 18 years.
So did you go to high school around here then?
Yes, I went to Waco High.
And while you were at Waco, did you play any sports?
Yes, I played soccer, and I was on the varsity soccer team.
How long did you play soccer?
I've played soccer my whole life, but I played for Waco High all 4 years of high school.
So would you say you've seen a lot of soccer during that time?
Yes.
Were you ever on a team with someone named Rory Street?
Yes.
And what was she like?
She was an outstanding soccer player, but also one of my best friends. I've known her my whole life, growing up playing soccer, and she was just an amazing player and an amazing friend.
Now, you keep saying was, so Ms. Saracen, what's your understanding of why you're here today?
I'm here today because my friend tragically died on September 7th, 2018.
Is that the last time you saw Rory Street?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk with you about what happened on September 7th, 2018. Where were you on that date around 3 p.m.?
I was on the soccer fields where we scrimmaged and where we had practice.
And when you say you were on the soccer field, where was that field located?
It was outside of the school, and there was a field, and there was also another field next to it that we called the Burma Road field.
So, Ms. Saracen, can you explain to us what was going on at practice that day, starting at the beginning?
At the beginning, we were having practice and we were doing a scrimmage. And then coach told me that I needed to go to Burma Road and start doing Burma Road because something I did, I guess she wasn't happy with.
So can you tell us, what is Burma Road?
Burma Road is an exercise where you run for 30 yards and then you dribble the ball for 30 yards, kick it into a goal, and then bear crawl for 60 yards back.
And do you know what the purpose of Burma Road is?
It was to typically teach us a lesson or to punish us whenever we messed up during practice.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation and lack of personal knowledge as to what the purpose of Burma Road was.
Okay, response.
Your Honor, Ms. Saracen has already testified that she was on the Waco High School soccer team for 4 years, and she knows what Burma Road is. She would have the requisite foundation to be able to say why people are often sent to Burma Road.
Your Honor, may be heard.
Sure, very briefly.
The witness hasn't testified who sends people to Burma Road, how she knows why those people are sent to Burma Road. She testified that this is a form of discipline, so we can infer that she didn't send herself there to teach herself a lesson.
Okay, I'm not really understanding the objection. I think she's perfectly qualified to testify to what the question that was asked, which is, what was the purpose of that from her point of view? If you'd like, I'll go ahead and I'll instruct the jurors as follows. The testimony is just what it appears to be. She's testifying as to what her conclusions were, why people were sent to Burma Road. She's perfectly qualified to do it as a team member. Insofar as the testimony is being used for some greater ontological examination of what the practice was for, that's inappropriate. You shouldn't take the testimony as such. So objection overruled insofar as it goes to anything for that. You have, let's see, 4239, and I'll start the timer again when you begin talking.
Yes. Ms. Saracen, was Burma Road attached to your practice field where you normally would scrimmage during practice?
Not necessarily. It was right next to it, about 20 yards or so next to it.
Ms. Saracen, do you have an exhibit folder with you? And if so, can you turn to Exhibit 2?
Yes. I have it open.
Ms. Saracen, do you recognize what is depicted in Exhibit 2?
Yes.
What is it?
It is an aerial view photo of our practice field.
And Ms. Sahakian, will you please publish for the court what has already been admitted as Exhibit 2?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Ms. Saracen, looking at Exhibit 2 right here, what do the red and the blue boxes show?
The blue box was our normal practice field, and the red box was where we did Burma Road.
So about how far apart would you say those two spaces are?
They are right next to each other.
I'm sorry, perhaps my question wasn't clear. How far apart would you say those are when somebody is on Burma Road and the team is on the practice field?
About 20 yards.
And thank you, Rima, you can put that down. So Ms. Saracen, who sends players to Burma Road?
Coach Taylor.
And you said that you were sent to Burma Road that day. I want to talk about that. What happened after you were sent there?
So I was running Burma Road for about 15 minutes, and Rory had been sent up there. He didn't do something right in practice, and I overheard Coach Taylor say, "You're useless on the field. You might as well run until you pass out." And then she came up and joined me at Burma Road.
Okay. And so when you heard Coach Taylor yell that you can go run until you pass out, were you shocked shocked by that language?
No, not really.
And why not?
Coach Taylor often said things like that to us. It was a way to punish us or try to make us work harder. It was pretty normal for her to speak to us like that.
And so, Aubrey, what was your relationship like with Coach Taylor?
Personally, it was, a coach-player relationship. She wasn't my favorite coach ever, but she made our team be successful. But I didn't think that she was that kind or caring towards her players.
So you said that Rory was sent to Burma Road. When she came over there, did anybody else come with her to watch the two of you?
No.
And about how hot would you say it was at that point?
It was definitely 100 degrees or over 100 that day.
So after you were both sent to Burma Road, were either of you ever given a break?
No.
And did anybody ever come over and offer you water?
No.
Was there any shade out near Burma Road?
No, there wasn't.
So were you in the sun the entire time?
Yes.
Now, while you were running Burma Road, did you notice anything unusual that was going on with Rory at that time?
Yeah. Rory was really struggling. She looked really pale and was saying that she felt funny. And that her chest was in pain and was hurting.
When you heard that, were you concerned?
I was very concerned because in the past, Rory has always been really tough and never really complains. She's even played a full soccer game with her nose broken and never said anything. So it was definitely something out of the ordinary for her to complain.
When you heard that she wasn't feeling well at that point, did you go and say anything to anyone?
No, I didn't really have time to. Right after we had that conversation, Coach had started yelling at her to come back down on the field.
Do you remember what specifically, if anything, Coach Taylor was yelling?
Yeah, she was saying that Rory was lollygagging around and that she wasn't so special and she was going to show her how not special she was.
So after you got called back to Burma Road, were you able to still see the practice field from where you were at?
Yes.
And so what happened after that?
After that, Coach Taylor started the slide tackle exercise thing, and all the players lined up in a single file line, and Rory was in front of them, and they would dribble the ball, or Rory would be dribbling the ball, and the players would run towards Rory to try and slide tackle the ball from him in that drill.
So,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
No, Ms. Harrison, please continue. I'm so sorry. I thought you were finished.
I was just correcting what I said. You go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Harrison, what exactly is a slide tackle that you keep mentioning?
A slide tackle is where a player has the ball and another player trying to get the ball from the player who has the ball will slide kind of towards their shins or feet, ankles to try and get the ball away from that person.
Now, you said that Rory was lined up in the middle. Was she the only one that was being slide tackled that day?
Yes.
And you said that she was in the middle, people were on the side of her. Had you ever seen a slide tackle done that way before?
No, I hadn't.
And you said you've been playing soccer for your entire life. So in your entire career as a soccer player, none of your coaches had ever done that drill before. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
How did Rory react once that drill started?
Rory had been knocked to the ground the first time she was slide tackled, and when she fell to the ground, coach went and grabbed her by her jersey to get her back up.
And once she was back up, was she slide tackled again?
Yes.
How many times was Rory slide tackled?
15 times.
And was she knocked to the ground each time?
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Phrase the question.
When Rory was slide tackled, what happened each time?
She fell to the ground every time.
Now, you said she was only slide tackled 15 times. Why did it stop?
Because the last time, whenever she fell to the ground, she started groaning, convulsing, shaking, and started to have a seizure. And she never got back up after that.
Thank you, Ms. Saracen. Pass the witness, Your Honor.
33:57. And just to be clear, I did stop the clock for the leading objection. Just didn't announce the time because it was so short.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so 45:35.
Cross-examination, Your Honor?
Yes, 45:35. When you start talking, I'll start the clock.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Saracen. Are you able to see and hear me okay?
Yes.
How are you doing, ma'am?
I'm doing the best I can be.
I want to start by talking about your relationship to the parties in this case. You and Rory Street grew up together.
Yes.
You played soccer together.
Yes.
You went to school together.
Yes, we did.
The two of you hung out all the time.
Yes, we did.
You often went over to Miss Street's house.
That's correct.
So you also know Rory Street's mom, the plaintiff in this case.
Yes.
Your entire life, Rory Street was one of your best friends.
That's correct.
Now, I want to compare that relationship with your relationship to Coach Taylor. As a junior, you had a starting position on the soccer team, right?
Yes.
And that was a full-time starting position.
Yes.
But as a senior, Coach Taylor demoted you.
Yes.
You had to start sharing your starting position with another player.
I did.
And that player was Coach Taylor's daughter.
It was. Yes.
You thought that was unfair of Coach Taylor.
I guess so. Yeah.
You guess so or yes?
I mean, I was upset. I think everyone would think that they're the best at their own position, but I thought it was unfair at the time. Yes.
So you were upset.
Yes.
Now I want to make sure we understand how well you could see that slide tackle drill you told us about on direct examination. You talked about Exhibit 2 on direct, right?
Yes.
Mr. Matz, can we display Exhibit 2 on the screen? And can we rotate and zoom it in? Now that blue box shows the soccer field.
Yes.
That's where the slide tackle drill took place.
Yes.
And the red box shows Burma Road.
Yes.
That's where you were when the slide tackle drill took place.
That's correct.
To your knowledge, every other player on the team was on the soccer field for the drill.
Yes.
That means every other player was closer to Rory than you were.
Yes.
Coach Taylor was closer to Rory than you were.
Yes.
Ma'am, you can't name a single person on the practice field who was farther from the drill than you were.
I don't believe I can, no.
You were about 60 feet away.
Yes, that's right.
So let's talk about whether practice on September 7th was unusual. You just told us on direct examination that it was really hot.
Yes, it was.
Miss Saracen, this is Waco
It is, yes.
in September.
Yes,
100-degree temperatures are normal for September in Waco.
that's true, yes.
And September 7th wasn't the first time Coach Taylor ever held practice in hot weather.
Yeah,
Now, on direct examination, you testified that you didn't get any water breaks during Burma Road, right?
right.
But you don't remember if you had any water breaks that day.
That's correct.
So you're not saying that there were no water breaks that day.
I'm saying I don't remember if there were.
So, ma'am, bringing you back to my question, you're not saying that there were no water breaks that day.
Yes,
There actually might have been multiple water breaks that day.
there could have been, I guess. Yeah.
But you don't remember.
I don't remember.
On direct examination, you also told us that Burma road drill is pretty hard.
It is. It's very hard.
But September 7th wasn't the first time Coach Taylor used that drill.
That's correct. It wasn't.
In fact, Coach Taylor used the Burma road drill a lot.
She did.
And you mentioned that there was also a slide tackling drill. Miss Saracen, slide tackles are a legal soccer move, right?
Right.
They're part of the game.
That's correct. They are.
So this wasn't the first time someone had been slide tackled in one of Coach Taylor's practices.
It wasn't the first time someone was slide tackled, but it was the first time they were 15 times in a row.
And ma'am, I didn't ask you about 15 times in a row. I asked you if this was the first time someone had been slide tackled at practice, and it wasn't.
It wasn't.
Before September 7th, you'd never seen someone die at one of Coach Taylor's practices.
Absolutely not.
Before September 7th, you'd never seen one of Coach Taylor's players leave in an ambulance.
I don't believe so, no.
Before September 7th, you'd never seen someone sent home from one of Coach Taylor's practices because of dehydration.
I can't say I know or don't know that.
Ma'am, I'm just asking you about what you saw. You've never seen someone leave Coach Taylor's practice because of dehydration.
I guess not.
So let's talk about what was different on September 7th. Before practice, Miss Street never told you she was on cocaine.
That's correct.
And you testified earlier that during practice, Miss Street told you she was feeling a little funny.
Yes,
She said her chest hurt.
she did.
But at that point, she didn't tell you she was on cocaine.
She had never told me that.
So then you saw her go down to the field for the slide tackle drill.
Yes,
And you claim you could hear what was being said from 60 feet away.
yes,
You never heard Miss Street tell Coach Taylor she was on cocaine.
no, I never heard that.
You never heard Miss Street tell the trainer she was on cocaine.
I never heard that either.
That day, you never heard Miss Street tell anyone she was on cocaine.
That's correct.
Now, you just told us that you and Miss Street were lifelong friends. Before September 7th, 2018, you had never seen Miss Street use cocaine before coming to practice.
That's correct.
And before that day, you had never seen Miss Street require medical attention at practice.
I don't believe so.
Pass the witness.
$37.15 remaining. And let me set your clock at any redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor. May this witness step down?
You may. Okay, so 33:57. And whenever you're ready to start doing what's next in your case in chief, you're going to read something in. Just start talking and I'll start timing.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Sahakian, will you please post a highlighted copy of the deposition of Jordan Street? At this time, Your Honor, we'll be reading in portions of the deposition of Jordan Street. Prior to trial, I did provide this highlighted copy of each section we do plan to read in to opposing counsel.
Excellent.
Starting on page 2 of the deposition, starting with line 6. Question. Good morning. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jordan Street.
Now going to line 15 on page 2. Question. Do you have any children?
I did. My daughter, Rory.
Now going down to page 6 of the deposition, starting with line 10. Question. Was Rory a troubled kid?
No, Rory was a good kid.
Question. Did she use any drugs?
Absolutely not. If I had suspected that or seen any evidence of that, then there would have been serious consequences. Whenever Rory acted up in the past, even just threats of grounding and chores around the house proved to be effective deterrents. I have no idea why that test showed that, but it can't be accurate.
Now going to page 7 of the deposition, line 8. Question. Did Rory regularly visit her pediatrician?
At least once a year for a physical.
Question. During any of those yearly physicals, were there any issues?
None. Rory had never had any serious medical issues, just normal kid stuff.
Page 8, line 3 of the deposition. Question. Do you know what a slide tackle is?
Sure.
Line 9 of page 8 of the deposition. Question. Are slide tackles violent?
They can be. I mean, it's soccer, so a lot of the injuries are pretend acting. But anytime you're running full speed and you slide feet first at another player's legs, that can be a dangerous situation.
And lastly, page 9, starting at line 3 of the deposition. Question. Is it important to teach slide tackling as a coach?
Yes, it is, but that isn't what happened here. This wasn't a drill to teach Rory how to slide tackle or defend against them.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge. May I be heard?
Very briefly.
I have a good faith belief that within this witness's deposition, she states that she was not there on September 7th, 2018 at the practice where Rory died. Therefore, she cannot testify to what the drill actually was and what it looked like because she wasn't there.
Response.
Your Honor, we would be willing to redact everything after yes until in all the time I've played.
That's fine. That's a fine concession if you want to do that. So sustain and just read the part that you've agreed to read.
Yes, Your Honor.
The time again.
Starting at line 3, question, is it important to teach slide tackling as a coach?
Yes, it is. But that isn't what happened here.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sahakian, we're stopping after yes, it is, and then starting back up at in all the time that I've played.
Yes, it is. In all the time that I've played, coached, and watched soccer, I've never seen a drill like that. Not once.
And Your Honor, that concludes our read-in of the deposition of Jordan Street.
55, anything further on your case in chief?
No, Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff rests.
Okay, 3055. Defense, ready to begin. Let me set your clock real quick. 37:15. And before we proceed to your case in chief, do you have any motions or anything?
Yes, Your Honor. We have a motion under Rule 52 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure.
Sure, let's hear it.
The defense moves to dismiss the plaintiff's claim because they have failed to prove negligence. To dismiss a claim under Rule 52C, 3 things are required. First, the plaintiff must have been fully heard on an issue, and the plaintiff just rested. Second, the court must be able to make a factual finding on that issue. In this case, the record establishes that everything that happened on the practice on September 7th, 2018 was standard and routine. Third, the plaintiff's claim must require a favorable finding on this issue. Your Honor, negligence is the first element of the plaintiff's claim. If the court determines that the plaintiff has failed to prove that element, that's dispositive. And for those reasons, we move for a dismissal of the plaintiff's claim.
Okay. Any brief, or I'll just go ahead and roll on the motion. I'm going to deny the motion. Just because something is standard or routine doesn't mean it couldn't have been a long-lasting standard routine pattern of negligence. So therefore, there is some evidence in the record such that continuing on is appropriate. You now have 36 minutes and 13 seconds, and you may begin your case in chief as you choose. Once you begin talking, I'll start the timer.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Reese Taylor.
What?
Good morning, Miss Taylor, or good afternoon, Miss Taylor. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Now, I want to start by talking about yourself. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Reese Taylor
Where do you live?
in Waco, Texas.
And what do you do for a living?
I am the varsity soccer coach at Waco High School.
Did you know Rory Street?
Yes, she was one of my players.
How long ago did Miss Street play on your team?
In 2018 was the last time.
Now I want to talk about your coaching career. How long have you coached high school athletes?
For more than 20 years.
So how long have you been coaching soccer?
Also for more than about 20 years I've been coaching soccer. Yeah.
How would you describe your relationship towards your players?
Good. I think of myself as tough but fair, and I think of the girls as sort of my own kids.
So as a coach, what's your highest priority?
The safety of my players.
And what's the biggest goal that you have for your players?
For them to be successful. I want them to enjoy the game and be successful.
Now, Coach Taylor, we've heard some testimony that you sometimes discipline your players in practice. Is that true?
Yes, of course. Every coach has to discipline.
Why do you have to discipline your players?
Because the team needs to all be on the same page for a team to function.
So how do you balance discipline with safety?
Well, like I said, safety is always the highest priority. So if the discipline were to reach a dangerous level, obviously it would end, and I wouldn't ever let discipline get to that level.
Do you ever have a trainer that attends practice?
Yes, Jess Merriweather is at every practice.
And what does Jess Merriweather, your trainer, what does she do?
Well, her role is sort of twofold. She, is there obviously for things, if there were any injuries, sometimes there could be sprained ankles, things like that. She's there for that, but she also keeps an eye on the girls. I can't see everyone at one time, so she helps me in that regard as well.
So Coach Taylor, in your entire over 20-year career, How many times have you had a player that died during practice?
Just Rory.
In your entire career, how many players have been hospitalized during practice?
None.
So let's talk about September 7th, 2018. Did you have soccer practice that day?
Yes,
And where'd you hold that practice?
at the practice field at the school.
What time?
Around 3:15.
Why did you decide to have practice in the afternoon?
Well, it's when the girls get out of school, and I like for the girls to train in the heat because a lot of their games are in the heat. So it's best to kind of condition for that.
So let's talk. I want you to walk us through what Miss Street was doing during practice. Mr. Matz, can we pull up Exhibit 2 again? And can we get that rotated, zoomed in version? Great. Coach Taylor, what are we looking at here in Exhibit 2?
The blue section is the practice field, and the red section is where we run a drill called Burma Road.
So I want to break that down about where Rory was. When practice started, where on this photo was Rory?
In the blue.
And what happened at the beginning of practice on the soccer field?
We were doing a scrimmage, and I noticed that Rory was running at half speed. She wasn't giving it her all.
So what did you do?
I sent her to Burma Road.
You said that the red box is Burma Road. What's involved in this Burma Road drill?
So the player sprints for 30 yards, then dribbles the ball for 30 yards, shoots a goal, and then runs back the 60 yards. I'm sorry, not runs, bear crawls back the 60 yards.
Did you create this Burma Road drill?
No, definitely not. Burma Road has been around for decades. I ran Burma Road when I was a player at Waco High.
To your knowledge, how many students have gotten hurt doing the Burma Road drill?
None. None.
When you had Miss Street do the Burma Road drill on September 7th, how was she doing?
She was still going half speed to my view. She still wasn't giving it her all.
Objection, speculation. Motion to strike the she wasn't giving it her all.
Your Honor may be heard.
Absolutely.
This is rationally based on the witness's perception. This is her player. She'd been coaching this person for years. She would be able to tell what's her all and what's not her all.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Yeah, she's asking what the coach's impression was. So, instruct the jury again. This isn't what was in fact happening. It is this witness's testimony and this witness's impression of what was happening. You can continue 2958.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay. So far you've testified that Ms. Street wasn't performing well during the scrimmage or in the Burma Road drill. Did you notice anything unusual about her physical condition?
No.
Did you notice anything unusual about her physical appearance?
No, certainly.
If a student is struggling physically, what kinds of symptoms would you expect to see?
Sometimes they can become really pale, overly sweaty. Occasionally, I've even had a student throw up, things like that.
How many of those symptoms was Miss Street exhibiting that day?
None that I saw.
All right, so let's go back to practice. When you saw Miss Street wasn't running Burma Road at her usual speed, what did you do?
I called her over to do another drill.
Why?
Well, like I said, it goes back to discipline, and she still wasn't, heeding my criticism. So I thought she should we should do another drill.
And what kind of drill did you have Rory do?
A slide tackle drill.
What's a slide tackle?
A slide tackle is when the defensive player is trying to depossess the offensive player of the ball. And so the defensive player slides toward the player with the ball, her feet, to try to knock the ball out.
Had you ever done this particular slide tackle drill in practice?
No, it was something I just came up with right then, but we practice slide tackles all the time.
So I want to be clear about that. Had you ever done other slide tackle drills in practice?
Yeah, definitely.
Why have you used slide tackles in a soccer practice?
I don't understand the question.
Why did you practice slide tackles?
Oh, because they're very common in the soccer games, and so and they can be one of the more physically demanding moves in a soccer game, and they involve a lot of contact. So, being a bit more dangerous as far as soccer moves go, I want to make sure my girls are as best prepared in practice so that they can always handle it if it comes up in a game.
So how is Miss Street doing during the slide tackle drill?
She was struggling. It was a challenging drill, but she kept pushing through it.
Did you ever see her show signs that would show you that she needed medical attention?
No, absolutely not.
And was your trainer there?
Yes.
Did your trainer suggest that you stop the drill?
No.
Did Miss Street ask you to stop the drill?
No.
Now, were you here for the testimony of the plaintiff's witness, Aubrey Saracen?
Yes.
Now, Miss Saracen testified that during this drill, Rory Street looked pale, lifeless, and that her hands were on her hips. Is that what Miss Street looked like to you?
I don't recall her looking like that.
So during the slide tackle drill, who was closer to Miss Street, you or Aubrey Saracen?
I was.
How much closer?
At least 40, 50 feet closer.
During the slide tackle drill, when was the first time you realized something was wrong?
When Rory collapsed.
Coach Taylor, I need to ask you about some information that was discovered after Miss Street died. Mr. Matz, can we display the toxicology report that's already in evidence? I believe it's Exhibit 15. Now, Coach Taylor, are you aware that blood drawn from Miss Street after she died tested positive for cocaine?
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge. This witness, based on her prior deposition, has never seen this document before. While she may have knowledge that there was cocaine found in her system, she can't, to put this document up with her and allow her to see the exact amount, she has no knowledge of this document, and we have good faith belief she's never seen it before.
This exhibit pre-admitted?
Yes, Your Honor. Just because, Your Honor, while the exhibit is already in evidence, that does not mean that a witness has the foundation to speak about it on an examination. And this witness lacks that foundation.
Okay.
Your Honor, if I may.
What was the question that you were about to ask?
Your Honor, I was going to ask Coach Taylor if she was aware that after Rory died, cocaine was found in her system. And we have no intent of asking her how much cocaine or anything besides that question.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection. It's in evidence. Certainly can be shown to the witness.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, 2506, ready to resume when you start talking.
So Coach Taylor, are you aware that blood drawn from Rory Street after she died tested positive for cocaine?
Yes, I've heard that.
When Miss Street was at practice that day, did you know she had cocaine in her system?
No, absolutely not.
if you had known that Miss Street had cocaine in her system, which drills would you have had her do that day?
None. I wouldn't have even allowed her to be at practice.
Pass the witness.
24:29. Okay, so let me set your clock again. You have 30 minutes and 55 seconds. And ready to be across when you start talking.
Ms. Taylor, you're an experienced coach,
Yes.
and you describe yourself as a successful coach.
Yes.
One measure of a successful coach is how much they win.
Yes.
And since taking over at Waco, you've won a lot.
That's true.
To be that successful, you need talented students.
Yes.
Students like Rory Street.
Yes. She was so talented.
Now, you claim you want your students to perform at maximum potential.
Yes.
So in your words, you push them to get the best out of them.
Yes.
But you'd agree that as a coach, you also have a duty to protect your students,
Yes.
to keep them safe.
Yes.
You don't want to push them too hard.
No, and you know, that doesn't benefit the team either. A sick or unhealthy player doesn't help the team win either, you know, so they go hand in hand.
And you also understand, just like that parents like Miss Street depend on you to train their children to be good athletes.
Absolutely.
But you also understand that those parents expect you to do that job safely.
Yes.
Now, one of the ways you keep that promise to parents is by staying up to date on safe coaching practices.
Yes.
To do that, you attend coaching clinics several times a year.
Yes.
Now, Ms. Taylor, I'd like to refer you to your exhibit file at this point. Would you please take a look at Exhibit 11 for identification? And referring court and counsel to Exhibit 11. And whenever you have that, Ms. Taylor, just let me know.
I have it.
Oh, okay. Now, Ms. Taylor, you recognize this form.
Oh, maybe I don't have it. It's not a form.
Perhaps I'll rephrase. You recognize this PowerPoint.
Yes.
These are slides from a PowerPoint presentation given at the annual meeting of the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association.
Yes.
They're in substantially the same condition as the last time you reviewed them.
Yes. I think, yeah.
Your Honor, plaintiff moves Exhibit 11 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, it is admitted and you may publish it. 28:20.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkian. Now, Ms. Taylor, on the second page of this document, it talks about practicing in the heat
Yes.
and what to do when temperatures reach 100 degrees or above.
Yes.
Now, on September 7th of 2018, you were holding a team practice on campus
Yes.
in the middle of the afternoon
Yes.
on a particularly hot day.
I mean, it was typical for September. I mean, yeah, it was very hot. Yes.
So the answer to my question is yes, it was particularly hot that day.
Sure.
It was about 103 degrees.
I think that's probably right. Yeah.
And to be clear, you don't practice in the shade.
No.
You practice directly in the sun.
Yes.
Because in your words, it toughens your players up.
Yes.
Now, on this document, it recommends that in heat, practices must include a 5-minute break every 15 minutes of practice.
Yes.
And that those breaks should be in the shade if possible.
Yes.
But on that day, you didn't give breaks every 15 minutes.
No, I mean, this is more of a, you know, tips and tricks sort of thing, and we just keep water there that the girls go get whenever they feel they need it. So no, I don't have set breaks.
So the answer to my question is no, you did not provide any breaks every 15. You did not provide breaks every 15 minutes.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't force them to take a break.
And you definitely didn't provide any shade.
No.
But your practices usually lasted about 2 to 3 hours.
Yes.
And this PowerPoint here recommends that in the heat of over 100 degrees, that no practice should last longer than 2 hours.
Right. That's what it says.
Now, on that day, you were unhappy with Rory's performance in practice.
Yes.
You described her as dogging it.
Right.
You didn't think that she was listening to your criticism.
That's right.
And it started to anger you.
Anger. I mean, I was frustrated. Yes.
That's right. You said that nothing will get your heat up quicker than a player who just won't listen.
Yeah, and especially Rory, who's usually, very respectful and one of my best players. I wasn't used to seeing her goof off like that.
So it was frustrating that day.
Yes.
Now, going back to September 7th of 2018, which you talked a lot about on direct examination, when you thought that Rory was goofing off, you were about 20 to 30 yards away when she was on Burma Road.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
But you never walked over there to watch her up close.
No.
You never asked her what was going on with her that day?
No.
Never asked her if she was all right?
No.
You just decided to send her to run sprints on Burma.
Yes.
And you say that that's a way to teach your athletes a lesson.
Yes, I'm their coach. Yes.
Which you'd agree was exactly what you wanted to do to Rory that day.
Yes, I wanted to teach her to take practice more seriously.
Well, your exact words were you wanted to teach her a lesson that day. Isn't that right?
Yes, the lesson being to take practice more seriously.
Now, Burma Road involves sprinting.
Correct.
And dribbling a soccer ball.
Correct.
And then shooting that ball into a goal.
Yes.
And finally, then crawling back on your hands and feet to the starting line.
Yes.
And your players have to keep doing that until you can tell them to stop.
Yes.
But you don't believe that a practice like that might endanger their health?
Nothing has ever led me to believe that. No, I've never had a player have need medical attention because of Burma Road.
You remember giving a prior deposition in this matter?
Yes.
At the time you were asked questions and you answered them?
Yes.
And at that time you were asked to raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
And you did tell the truth?
Yes.
And that statement that you gave, it was a full and complete statement of everything relevant to this case.
I answered the questions that were asked of me.
And then you actually signed that deposition at the end and you stated that it was a full and complete statement of everything that had to do with this case, right?
No, how could I know everything that has to do with the case? Yes, it was everything of my knowledge.
Right. And nowhere in that deposition do you ever say that you've never had anything happen to any of your students on Burma Road. Isn't that right?
I don't recall. I don't know if anyone asked me, had I ever had anything happen to anyone.
And I think we drew an objection here. Ms. Cully, your microphone's off. Try it again. Your microphone, you're muted again. You're muted again. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Sorry about that, Your Honor. As per usual, technical difficulties.
Okay. What's the objection?
Your Honor, the objection is hearsay. There's no contradiction within this deposition that opposing counsel is trying to get out of. If a student had needed medical attention and the witness didn't disclose that, that would be a contradiction and an impeachment by omission. But because there is no contradiction and this is an improper impeachment, this document is hearsay.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Absolutely.
Your Honor, an impeachment by omission is not when a contradiction has been made. An impeachment by omission is when the witness has signed a deposition that says it is a full and complete statement, and then that witness testifies on the stand to something that was never mentioned within that deposition. Here, Ms. Taylor has stated that she wasn't asked that question, which is not hearsay because the lack of a statement is not a statement being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Therefore, this is not an improper impeachment by omission, and the witness should be allowed to answer the fact that she's never stated this before in her prior deposition.
Let's call it brief rebuttal on that.
Yes, Your Honor. Witnesses aren't required to disclose every single negative fact. That would be like asking Coach Taylor to say that she's never been a lawyer before, that she's never been a business person before. She would have to disclose if a student did require medical attention. That's what the completeness rule is about. The fact that she didn't include a negative fact makes the reference to the deposition hearsay.
I would agree with that. I'm gonna overrule, or I'll sustain the objection rather. And let's move off of the impeachment because, I mean, that would be a pretty absurd result, right? If that the signing of a deposition meant that now the universe is closed and every fact has been said. Of course, that's not the case, right? That's the reason why she's on the stand right now. It wouldn't make any sense if the question had been posed, and she had answered that question in a different way, that's fine. Or if, she had declined to answer, that would be a proper impeachment by omission, right? I have no comment on that. And now she does have a comment, but this isn't that, right? The question wasn't asked. This is an impeachment by omission. So let's move off of the impeachment unless you can set her up and get it done in a different way. So with that, hold on. Let me see. You've got 22:09. And when you start talking, I'll start the clock again.
Now, just to pick up where we were, Ms. Taylor, you said that you didn't believe that a practice like Burma Road might endanger your students' health.
No, I didn't. If I believed that, I wouldn't use that drill.
When you watched Rory running Burma, you thought that she was still dogging it, right?
Right. She was going at half speed and kind of goofing off.
Even though, like you said, that was completely inconsistent with how Rory normally performed.
Right.
In your words, that's why you found her performance so frustrating.
Right.
So that's when you decided you had to discipline her in some other way.
That's right.
Now, you talked a lot about the slide tackling drill on direct examination, so I kind of want to get into that with you. You concluded that disciplining Rory was for her own good, right?
For her good, for the good of the team. I think everyone would agree, parents, coaches, teachers, there has to be discipline to have a cohesive unit.
And you believe that you couldn't allow her laziness and irresponsibility to continue.
That's right.
So you had Rory participate in a slide tackling drill.
That's right.
You chose that drill in particular because slide tackles are hard tackles with lots of physical contact.
Yes.
Because you wanted to make sure Rory got the point that her attitude and effort were not appropriate.
Right. Rory's one of the best players, so it seemed appropriate to use one of the more challenging sorts of moves.
But directing you back to Exhibit 11, Ms. Sahakian, thank you. And the third slide of Exhibit 11, you actually had some specific training about slide tackling.
Training. This is the slideshow I viewed, yes.
And it said towards the top of that slide that tackles can cause serious injury.
It says that mistimed or poorly executed slide tackles can cause serious injury. So practice them to make sure that they're not mistimed or poorly executed.
So sometimes tackles can cause injury.
Yes, when they're mistimed or poorly executed.
It also says when teaching on this slide that you should instruct your players not to tackle unless it's necessary.
Right, but that means in a game. I mean, it's going to be necessary sometimes in a game. So you practice it and practice to make sure they're prepared.
Well, to be clear, Ms. Taylor, the top of this PowerPoint is titled Teaching Tackling. It doesn't say teaching tackling in a game, right?
Right, but that would mean we're going to teach slide tackling today. I'm going to tell you, don't do it unless it's necessary. All right, we're done learning about slide tackling. No, I don't think that that's a reasonable way to read that.
Well, unless it's necessary, meaning you wouldn't want to put somebody in a position where they could get hurt, right?
Right, of course.
But on September 7th, you actually instructed your entire team to slide tackle Rory.
Yes.
Now, slide tackle drills, as you said, are something that you do on a regular basis.
Yes.
But you would admit, Miss Taylor, that you don't usually do it like this.
Right. This was something I came up with on the fly.
And that you'd never used this drill for discipline before.
Correct.
After the first few people tackled Rory, you saw her struggling, right?
She was struggling. It was a challenging drill, and it was meant to be challenging.
But you didn't stop them.
No, she continued with the drill. If I thought she was struggling to the point of needing medical attention, I would have intervened.
But you didn't let just one or two people tackle Rory, right?
No, I think it was like 14 or 15 of the girls slide tackled her. Slide.
I'm sorry, what you were saying?
Slide tackled. Yeah, all I said.
And that's when she collapsed on the field, right?
Yes, that's when she collapsed.
And that's where she died.
Yes, that's where she died.
Now, Miss Taylor, you claim that it was Rory who made the bad choices that day.
In hindsight, obviously I would have done something different, but I didn't know that she had cocaine in her system.
Even sitting here today, you believe there is nothing that you would do differently, right?
Given the information I had at that time, no, it was a fine practice. Obviously, knowing what I know now, knowing what occurred because of it, obviously, no, I wouldn't do the same thing I did.
You don't take any responsibility for what happened to Rory Street that day.
No, I don't want to sound heartless, but no, I had no idea and no way to know that she had done cocaine before soccer practice. How could I have known that? And how could I have prepared for that?
Miss Taylor, my question was much simpler than that. My question was, you don't take any responsibility.
How is that a simple question? I mean, no, I don't take responsibility, but no.
Pass witness, Your Honor.
16:12 remaining. And let me reset the clock. You've got 24:29. Any redirect for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, let me set your clock and then we can get that started. 24:29. I'll begin the clock when you start talking.
Now, Coach Taylor, I want to clarify something you said in cross-examination. You were asked about how many water breaks you gave your team on September 7th. Are you testifying that you didn't give any breaks or that you just don't remember how many you gave?
I don't recall giving breaks one way or the other. There's always water set up there for the girls.
And Mr. Matz, can we display that exhibit 11 that opposing counsel had up? Perfect, thank you. Now, opposing counsel also asked you about holding practices in 100-degree weather. Does this slide say not to hold practices in 100-degree weather?
No, the slide assumes that practices will be held.
And Mr. Matz, can we go to the next slide? You were asked about your slide tackling drill. Does this slide say not to do slide tackling in practice?
No, I mean, it says teaching tackling. It says we should be practicing tackling.
Thank you. Nothing further.
23:19 remaining. Anything further from this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Cully, you were on mute again. Anything further from this witness?
No, Your Honor. May Ms. Taylor step down? Apologies about the mute.
Okay, there's a little red icon that'll appear in the corner when you're muted, so just look for that to see if you're actually on audio or not, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. As I mentioned, my second chair is actually controlling my computer.
I understand.
So sometimes there might be a little bit of a lag. That's my fault. I'm sorry.
Witness can be excused. Okay, so 2319 remaining. Anything else for the defense's case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. We actually have a few portions of testimony we'd like to read onto the record.
Excellent. When you start talking, I'll start timing.
Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to start with Exhibit 18, which is the expert report of Spencer London. This document is already in evidence per Your Honor's pretrial ruling. Exhibit 18, page 3 on the second to last paragraph. It says, based on the foregoing, it is my opinion within a reasonable degree of medical probability that Rory Street's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine. And Your Honor, next we'd like to read some deposition excerpts from Jess Merriweather. This witness has been stipulated to be unavailable for hearsay purposes, and in this case, the former testimony exception applies. So reading from page 8, lines 18 to 20 of the deposition, question, at any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in any way that would have indicated she was in trouble? Answer, no, not at all. And that's it from the defense, Your Honor.
2208 remaining. Do you rest your case? Ms. Cully, you rest?
Yes, Your Honor. Sorry.
With that, if we don't have any motions or anything else to take up at this time, I guess we're going to move into closings. Any motions that we need to take up or anything?
None from the defense.
Plaintiff?
No, Your Honor.
Let's take a brief 5-minute break. 6:05, we'll be back. Scoring judges, if you leave the room, please turn your camera on so I can see that you're gone. And we won't start until you get back. All right, it looks like we still have everybody. Since none of the judges left, we can go ahead and just get started, I think. So the way this is going to work, I'll just go over the timing again real quick. Once you hit sub 10 minutes, when you hit 10 minutes, I'll give you the 10-minute signal. I'm going to try to be as good as I can with the hand signals. Of course, I'm also listening and watching y'all, so if I'm a little slow in the uptake, just be aware. I'll give you each minute as we go down. Then once you hit 1 minute, half a minute, and then I'll count you down the last 10 seconds individually on my fingers. Does that sound acceptable? And I'll try to keep them in front of my robe. I know my little pasty hands are kind of lost on this background, so I will try my best to make them as visible as I can. All right, let's see here. We've got 16 minutes and 12 seconds. Any time that you don't use, of course, we'll just reserve for rebuttal, and I'll let you know how much time you have left when you finish talking, okay? I will start the timer when you begin.
When high school student Rory Street stepped onto the Waco High soccer field on September 7th of 2018, she expected another exhausting soccer practice. She expected that her demanding coach would require the team to scrimmage for 2 to 3 hours. And she even expected that she would have to practice in the Waco heat. But what she never expected was that on that day, her coach would become so frustrated with her star player that her desire to punish Rory would become more important than her duty to protect her. And Rory's mother, she never expected that when Rory left for practice that day, it would be the last time she'd ever see her daughter alive. Today, Your Honor, the issue for you to decide is whether this coach will finally be held responsible for her negligent actions and the tragic death that they caused. Today, we have proven by the greater weight of the evidence that defendant Reese Taylor is liable for negligence by establishing all three elements necessary: duty, breach, and causation. We are confident that we have established those three things because the evidence has shown two things. First, that the defendant failed to protect Rory Street. And second, that it was that failure and that failure alone that caused Rory's death. So let's take a look at that first point, that the defendant failed to protect Rory Street. Now, as a teacher and as an athletic coach, the defendant had a duty to coach students safely. That is undisputed, Your Honor. But what we have seen today is that when it came time to meet that duty, the defendant was all talk and no action. She claimed that it was all about safety first. But what we learned today was that for the defendant, it was about placing first. Everyone loves a winner, but in high school soccer, winning isn't everything, and especially not at the cost of a child's life. So what did we hear today about how the defendant failed to protect Rory? Well, first, we heard about a culture of intimidation and abuse. The defendant thinks that it is her job to toughen her students up and to push them hard. She admitted that today on cross-examination. In fact, she said during practice, right before she sent Rory to Burma Road, that she would make her run until she passed out. She abuses them verbally. In fact, we heard today from Aubrey Sarenson that Coach Taylor told Rory that she was going to show her just how special she was not. Screaming at them to motivate them. That's what we've heard today from her players. We heard that she gets angry when students don't perform. In fact, she herself admitted that nothing pisses her off more than when a student doesn't listen. But the defendant came here today and she still claimed that she hasn't done anything wrong. She says she's a tough coach, but she's fair. But what did Coach Taylor really do on September 7th, 2018? That wasn't fair. And it all starts with Burma Road. But the defendant claims that Burma Road is actually reasonable. But think about it, Your Honor. We heard that it was about 103 degrees. After Aubrey and Rory were sent to Burma Road, they had no breaks, no shade, no water. That in itself violates the training course that Coach Taylor went to only 3 months prior. Coach Taylor assumes that a child who is feeling ill must be dogging it. She ignores symptoms like somebody is being pale, a child with chest pain, struggling, feeling funny. All of this is a breach of her duty. Because Rory Street isn't a kid that complains. She's not a kid that fakes it. So either the defendant didn't notice all of her symptoms, or she just didn't care. Either way, that breaches the duty that she owed her to keep her safe. But then Coach Taylor took it even further when she put Rory in even more danger by doing this slide tackling drill that we've heard so much about today. And Your Honor, the drill itself isn't the problem here. It's the way that it was used, or rather, the way that it was abused. It was used to punish a child. And you heard today that this drill was never used before. Now, opposing counsel said in her opening statement, and I wrote it down, that everything that Coach Taylor did at practice on September 7th, 2018 was standard. Well, Your Honor, when someone does something for the very first time, and when everybody who takes the stand today says that they have absolutely never in all their years of soccer seen that done before, That is certainly not standard. This coach used this drill to punish a child over and over and over again. 15 times. She picked her up and made her keep going. And what was the result? Rory Street on the grass, seizing, twitching, convulsing, and dying. All because her coach wanted to make a point. Now, that brings me to the second thing that the evidence has shown today, that the defendant's failures caused Rory's death. But the defendant came here today and the defense wants you to believe that this is not their fault. They actually have blamed the victim today, said she was negligent because she ingested cocaine. The defendant, but Your Honor, what did the defendant really bring you to prove that? They brought you a toxicologist who gives an opinion that cocaine caused the death. But Your Honor, when you go back into your chambers after this trial is over and you review all of the exhibits that were introduced into evidence in this case, you'll see that we brought you a board-certified cardiologist with 20 years of experience treating people with heart problems, a medical doctor. And that medical doctor's opinion is that Rory's death was caused by heat stroke, not by cocaine. That her seizures were consistent with heat stroke, that the fluid in her brain was consistent with heat stroke, that her muscle breakdown found on the autopsy was consistent with heat stroke. When you go back and you compare those two reports, Your Honor, you will see that all of Rory's symptoms and everything her autopsy found was consistent with heat stroke. But that fluid in her brain and that muscle breakdown, that wasn't consistent with cocaine use. And we heard today that Rory Street got a physical every single year. So we know that this wasn't a problem that just wasn't caught before. So who do you believe in this case? Do you believe Dr. McConaughey, our cardiologist, who for over 20 years has looked at heart patients and decided what has made people die from heart conditions? Or do you listen to the defense's expert, Mr. Spencer London, a toxicologist who has absolutely no medical training and no experience treating patients and makes his living writing expert reports? Because when you look at his CV today, when you go into your chambers, you'll see that Mr. London has been hired for over 200 cases. Today, Your Honor, the evidence has clearly shown that Rory Street died from heat stroke after being exposed to grueling exercises by a coach who didn't care enough to protect her. This coach should be found liable today because she put punishment over protection. And that is why I'm asking you to return the only verdict that is consistent with the facts, required by the law, and demanded by justice. A verdict finding Coach Taylor liable. Thank you.
5:59 left for rebuttal. All right, let me get you set up. Okay, 22 minutes and 8 seconds left for your closing. Whenever you start talking, Ms. Cully, I'll start timing.
Yes, Your Honor. Almost everything about that practice was same as usual. Same players, wearing the same jerseys, on the same field. They got coaching from the same coach and training from the same trainer. They got winded on Burma Road, same as anyone who's ever played at Waco High. They got slide tackled, same as anyone who's ever played the game of soccer. They faced the same summer heat under the same summer sun. The practice that day was the same. The player was different. Because this time, Rory Street came to practice with a dangerous drug in her system. That's why September 7th ended in tragedy. It wasn't the coach. It was the cocaine. Today, the plaintiff had the burden of proof. They had to prove every element of their claim was more likely true than not. But 3 simple facts prevented the plaintiff from meeting that burden. Number 1, Coach Taylor's practices are perfectly safe. Today, the plaintiff criticized her decision to hold practice in 100-degree temperatures because they're grueling. But that's the point. If you train in 103-degree Waco afternoons, you'll be ready to play on 98-degree Waco nights. And opposing counsel made a big deal about these soccer association slides. But they don't say cancel practice when it's 100 degrees. They say, here's how you practice when it's 100 degrees. And then the plaintiff went on to criticize Coach Taylor by claiming she didn't give the players water breaks. But like every other element of their case, they didn't actually prove that. We never heard any evidence that there were no water breaks. We heard from our witnesses and theirs that no one remembers how many there were. I don't remember isn't more likely than not. I don't remember doesn't satisfy their burden. And then the plaintiff criticized the drill called Burma Road. Does it sound exhausting? Yeah. Unpleasant? Absolutely. But dangerous? No. Waco High soccer team has been running Burma Road since the 90s. There is no evidence, none, that a single player has gotten hurt running Burma Road. And there's nothing revolutionary about running difficult conditioning drills. In basketball, there is literally a drill called suicides. So then the plaintiff criticized Coach Taylor's slide tackling drill. First of all, it seems as though their eyewitness exaggerated the severity of this drill. The way Aubrey Saracen tells it, you might think that this was violent. 15 players smashing Rory Street like a tackling dummy. But here's the autopsy. The medical examiner didn't find a single bruise on Rory Street's body. The fact is, slide tackling is a part of the game. Physical contact is a part of the game. Even getting knocked down is a part of the game. So then we heard the plaintiff criticize Coach Taylor for disciplining her players. And they used a lot of words, and I wrote them down to make sure I got them right. They used words like intimidation, abuse. They tried to make it sound like discipline is a crime. But this is competitive high school sports. This is varsity. This is Texas. Learning discipline is one of the most valuable things that sports teaches us. It's not just about the scoreboard. It's about growing up. And Coach Taylor told you she tries to help every student reach their full potential. And that's exactly what she was doing. The reality is, Coach Taylor's results speak for themselves. She's been coaching soccer for 20 years. That's more than 7,000 days. And there is no evidence, absolutely no evidence, that any of her other players have ever died during her practices, or hospitalized, or left in an ambulance, or even suffered dehydration. Her practices are perfectly safe. So that brings me to fact number 2. Rory Street wasn't showing any unusual symptoms. But why is that important? Because if Rory Street looked like she was okay, then there was no reason for Coach Taylor to change a practice regimen she'd been using for decades. So let's start here. No one told Coach Taylor that Rory Street was physically ill. Miss Street told Aubrey Saracen that her chest hurts. Told Aubrey Saracen, I'm feeling funny. The talk screen tells us that Rory Street was on cocaine. But Coach Taylor knew none of this. Now, the plaintiff said to you, well, sure, Coach Taylor wasn't told Rory Street was sick, but she should have seen that Rory Street was sick. But let's examine if that's actually true. First, the plaintiff told you that Rory Street wasn't herself in practice. She missed some shots she usually makes. She ran a little slower than she usually runs. And the plaintiff acts like these are red flags. But Coach Taylor told you it didn't look like Rory was physically ill. It looked like she wasn't trying. And there is a big difference between a player who's physically ill and a player who's phoning it in. When a player is physically ill, you make them stop running. But when a player looks like they're phoning it in, you make them run more. Now, Rory Street, the plaintiff says that Rory Street showed symptoms she was physically ill. They mentioned that one time, Rory Street put her hands on her hips. That once, she was seen breathing heavily. But this is soccer practice. Of course, she was resting her arms and breathing heavily, but she wasn't doubled over or clutching her side or throwing up. They said that Rory looked pale and lifeless. They said that either Coach Taylor didn't see or that she didn't care. But they forgot the third option. Is it true? The trainer testified that Rory Street looked fine. Coach Taylor testified Rory Street looked fine. The only person who said otherwise was Aubrey Saracen. But Aubrey Saracen was too far away to see. When Rory Street supposedly looked pale and lifeless on the soccer field, the other players were on the soccer field. Coach Taylor was on the soccer field. But the plaintiff's eyewitness, 60 feet away on Burma Road. Miss Saracen admitted she can't name a single person farther from the action than she was. And that's their only eyewitness. So bottom line. The first outward symptoms of physical illness started after Rory collapsed. And at that point, it was too late. And this is the verdict form. Coach Taylor wasn't negligent to run practice the way she had for decades. She wasn't negligent to let a student practice after taking cocaine when she didn't know that student had taken cocaine. And she wasn't negligent for not responding to symptoms that simply weren't there. The plaintiff has failed to prove negligence, and that alone requires a verdict in favor of the defense. But there's one more reason why you should find for Coach Taylor. Today, we've raised an affirmative defense of comparative negligence, and we've got the burden here. We have to prove it's more likely than not that Rory Street's own negligence caused or contributed to her death. And this is point number 3. Rory Street took cocaine. Now, we're not saying that Rory Street was a bad person. She was just a teenager who made one very bad decision. But the standard for negligence is failing to use ordinary care. There's no debating that using a dangerous, illegal drug before soccer practice is negligent. So the only question here is if the cocaine caused or contributed to Rory Street's death. Now, we know cocaine was found in Rory's blood after she died. We know she was on cocaine while running in that summer heat. We know that cocaine can cause heat stroke. We know the only toxicologist who looked at this case said, yeah, Rory Street's death was caused or contributed to by cocaine. And it's not just the expert testimony. It's also common sense. You see, Rory's best friend had never seen her use cocaine before. And the medical experts agree. There's no evidence she'd used cocaine ever. When someone goes home safe and sound from every soccer practice for their whole life, except the one when they tried cocaine, it's common sense that cocaine caused or contributed to their death. The defense has met their burden. Now, the first thing the plaintiff said in their opening statement, and the first thing they talked about in their closing argument, was expectations. That the parents expected Coach Taylor to protect their kids, that Rory expected to have a tough practice. But what they left out were Coach Taylor's expectations. When Coach Taylor got to practice on September 7th, she expected it was like every other day. She expected she could push and stretch her players as much as usual, because she assumed none of them had come to soccer practice with cocaine in their system. We ask you to return a verdict in favor of the defense, because it wasn't the coach that caused this death. It was the cocaine. Thank you.
All right, 5:59 remaining. Let me set the timer real quick. All right, Miss Amy, when you begin, I'll start the timer.
Your Honor, opposing counsel said over and over and over again during this trial, it wasn't the coach, it was the cocaine. But what did they bring to actually prove that to you today? They brought you an expert report from a toxicologist, not a medical doctor, not someone who determines cause of death, a toxicologist. Now, when you go back and you look at all the evidence in this case, you'll see that on the autopsy, when the medical examiner looked at Rory Street's body, they determined that while the cause of death is listed above, we are unable to determine the cause of the sudden cardiac death that took place in this case. So, Your Honor, the defendant is asking you to believe that when the ME, the chief medical examiner in this county here in Texas, could not determine what caused Rory's sudden cardiac death, that their toxicologist, who never went to medical school, was able to do that. That doesn't make any sense, Your Honor. In fact, opposing counsel just said in her closing argument that it's common sense that when someone has cocaine in their system, that would contribute to their death. But we don't use common sense to determine someone's cause of death. A toxicologist might, but not the cardiologist that we brought you today. And when you read that medical opinion, you know that it's clear that Rory Street died from heat stroke. But more than that, the defense kept saying that this slide tackling drill, it wasn't unreasonable because it must have been exaggerated. Aubrey Saracen must have exaggerated how serious it was. Your Honor, Rory Street died while doing that drill. She didn't just collapse. She didn't just seize. She died. Maybe that's not as serious as a bruise, but it's pretty serious. They also want you to believe that in 20 years, according to Coach Taylor, that not one of her players has ever gone to the hospital. That's what she testified to today. She said, in 20 years, not one of my players has gone to the hospital, meaning that no one's gone with a broken bone, no one's gone with a torn ligament, no one's gone with a concussion, no one's gone to even get checked out to see if maybe one of those things had happened. Your Honor, who's exaggerating now? You can't trust what Coach Taylor said on the stand today because that statement doesn't make any sense. Today, the evidence is absolutely clear that Rory Street was the victim of a coach who didn't care enough to protect her and only cared enough to punish her. Hold the defendant liable for her negligent actions and the dangerous consequences. Thank you.
All right, guys, I'm going to take my ruling under advisement, joke, and I will go check and see where they're at with tabbing the ballots. Scoring judges, if you can email your ballots and hang out until we get confirmation that they've been tabbed. Really good job, guys. It was a lot of fun.